So welcome to the Northern New Jersey Salesforce user group. Michael Lupino and I are the user group leaders. And this meetup is really about sharing the insights, the experiences, the tips, the big takeaways from Dreamforce 21. And as all of you, it was a dramatically different Dreamforce than any other. And most people in the Salesforce community were not there in person. We're just watching it. If you're lucky, you had time to watch some of it on a screen on demand. So I invited a couple of folks who were either there or Jen, very on top of everything that's going on as it relates to Dreamforce, to share any of their key takeaways, like a panel roundtable. Again, like I mentioned before, informal. It's meant to be casual, while at the same time we're being respectful. I asked the panelists that they don't need to prepare anything whatsoever. If they could just have bullet points. What is it that they really want to highlight of the things that really stood out to them? But they are welcome to share anything that they want, whether it's a website, a video, a link, a presentation, anything. So with that, I just want to welcome everyone. Michael, did I forget? Should I?
No, I don't think you forgot anything, but it froze up on my end here. So I don't know if anyone else has seen David's face.
Yeah, it said something that I didn't. I'm not working off of any notes. No.
Just sped up and we can't see your video right now. Oh no.
Oh no.
A cartoon version of David Giller. I got disconnected from Zoom in the middle of talking. I don't even know at what point I got dropped off. Wait, so
That was a word limit.
so you guys did not get thrown off, right?
No.
No,
Okay, good.
All of a sudden you sped away up like you were on fast forward on a tape.
exactly.
People have been telling me, David, shut up and sit down. And I guess Zoom just did. Michael, what should I have said that I did not say?
You got cut off there. You sped up, but I think you covered the basics. Tonight's an informal chat. We've got several presenters to talk about their experiences, obviously with the Winter 21 release and in Dreamforce. I'm sorry. I don't know why. What's the Winter 21? I've got Winter 21 in the back.
It's all right.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead here and get started, certainly, with the talking.
Awesome. So right now we have Jen and Vanessa. And by the way, if anyone else was Dreamforce in person, by all means, share any additional wisdom or insights that you might have. But
And almost on cue, Vanessa Thomas showed up, and I know she was at Dreamforce.
and Andy should be joining us. Whatever. If he comes, he comes. If not, you know what? I'll reach out to him via Twitter right now. Jen, why don't you go first?
Okay. I just did the presentation just because I like seeing pictures as I'm talking. You're not just looking at my
Okay.
face. Okay, cool. All right. So, not sure if everybody knows me, but I'm Jen Lee, admin evangelist at Salesforce. Been there for a little over 4 months now, but seems much longer than that. So a couple of things that I want to highlight out of my experience is I'm a little biased because I'm part of the admin relations team. So I am going to definitely highlight our content as top highlights for Dreamforce. So the admin main show, which is called The Future of Admin Success, we really focused on talking about the skills that are needed for the admin. And I took a screenshot of the PowerPoint deck, the slide presentation that Ella and Rebecca shared. And it's a lot of different skill sets that are important for a successful admin, business skills and technology skills. And it really talks about, Ella highlighted an admin who's going through the job search and using Salesforce to really track her progress and to use it to highlight her skills as well. Like, I built this app and showcase that to your potential employers as things that I've built in Salesforce. So we had a few special guests. Gordon Lee talked about how you could grow your technical as well as your people skills. And again, if you're a new admin and you're seeking your first admin job, again, if you don't have the experience, build an app and showcase that app. Showcase what you've done if you don't really have that experience on paper. And then the segment that I was involved in virtually was we highlighted Mary Tagler, who's a Salesforce MVP, and she showed off an abbreviated version of my how I solve this series, where she showed how she used Flow and Slack to when there's a lead, and how she used Slack to allow her users to interact on that lead. And actually, the extended version of Mary Tagler's How I Solved This will be live tomorrow. So look forward to that. And then we had the Flow product manager on to talk about automation, change management, project management as skills that admins should have, and showing off a bunch of future enhancements with Flow Builder. Then product manager David Louie was on to show how we empower admin success using MuleSoft Composer, dynamic forms, and dynamic interactions, and that recently went GA. And then lastly, we had Leanne interview Brinkle Janani, who is the PM of App Builder, to talk about the future of App Builder and all the cool things that will be coming on board. And lastly, we awarded Tony Nyan with the Golden Hoodie. So he's our newest admin. Then we had 2 episodes that were pre-recorded, and Design and Build Apps Faster Awesome Admins was episode that was shot with Jason and my fellow admin evangelist. And in that session, we talked about how Addison Maisley, who's the admin, uses App Builder, dynamic forms, and dynamic interactions to design and build apps for her business user. And I had an episode as well, and both Diana and I showcased how Addison Maisley again, but this time she was able to automate for her business Poblano using a variety of Einstein Automate products. So she used Flow Builder, Flow Orchestrator, MuleSoft Composer, Next Best Action, Recommendation Builder, Slack, and Einstein Bots. So all that in like a 29-minute session. And then what I liked from True to the Core, which is a session that is always my Dreamforce favorite to go to. And if you didn't watch the admin preview for Winter 21 or the Flow, the Einstein Automate release readiness, then you probably would have heard at True to the Core the main question that everyone has about workflow roles and process builder retiring. So what I have here is a link to the recent blog post that Diana and I worked on that talks about all the questions that folks have about that, to ease some concerns and to get those timelines out in front of you and in writing, so you can start planning on moving your things to Flow. But it's True to the Core is just great. It allows people to ask questions and interact with the PMs. And I was very excited that Cheryl Feldman, who was a former fellow MVP and now a PM, was also there. And I think she's really going to kick butt as the PM of security. We couldn't have hired a better person for security, right? Like, she's been on point with the whole modify all data piece, and then we hired her. So that's just great. I know she's got just kick butt and do an awesome job at that. And for the dev main show, what I took as a highlight was the new code builder, which is the replacement for like virtual studio code, which is a client that you have to install. Code builder is web-based. That's pretty cool. And they also highlighted the DevOps Center. So if you're used to using chain sets, this is now like steps above chain sets. So before joining Salesforce, I used a tool called Capato, and it's DevOps Center. What I see of it now, like I know that it's going to continue to grow, reminds me of Capato and its capabilities to be able to select components and then be able to package those up and deploy, and also allow for workflow and review of those things. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that grows, and that's going GA in spring trade. And the architect main show. So that's the newest keynote. And so I'm really excited that the architects are now getting their own keynote at Dreamforce. And what I took out of that, I really like seeing the lucid charts that you'll be able to use to create those data model templates for sales and service clouds. But I also like, which is coming soon, the Salesforce product roadmaps which would be available. And you'll be able, as a customer, to be able to search for them and then use it to plan out your own roadmaps, knowing here are the things that are coming down the pike. So that was really cool. And the great thing about the Architect Main Show is admins are architects, right? We solution things, we design things, and those are things that architects do. And from the platform keynote, I took away a couple of products. There's the introduction of a Salesforce native backup and restore tool, which is going to be GA sometime this month. And one of the cool things about that is, from what I saw in the demo, is that it will allow you to compare and actually restore data at the record level. So that's cool. And then there's also Einstein Data Detect, which, if you use Shield, allows Shield to monitor data for sensitive data that's found in places that it shouldn't be, and like surfaces that up. So that's pretty cool. From the IT leaders guide, I just saw like a bunch of cool upcoming features that I'm excited for, like multi-object pages. What is that? I can't wait to be able to put multiple objects on a page, and just a lot of really cool features to be excited about and to look forward to. And they did a really cool thing about going through and showing demos of each. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend take a look at that recording. And I always like the various discussions that aren't like Salesforce-y. I liked listening to the interview that Soledad did with Parker Harris, and him talking about the beginnings of Salesforce and how he got advice from his dad to move forward with working with Mark on creating Salesforce. And so he shared this story about Mark always putting him up in costume at Dreamforce. Remember how Parker will always come out in different costumes, and eventually he stopped it because his kids asked him to. They're like, that. That's pretty embarrassing. So that was like,
Wow.
oh, I wonder why he stopped doing that. But I guess every year Mark still continues to ask him to, wear some type of costume. And then I just love the Luminary sessions that they had. I am a big Ted Lasso fan, and I actually finished season 2 yesterday. We waited for season 2, all the episodes to drop, and then we binge watched it. So I just love listening to Jason Sudeikis and also Wanda Sykes, who I think filmed it off in another area. And Will Smith is not available in recording. So if the people were able to catch it online, that was their one opportunity. But I also liked it when Sarah Franklin interviewed Aly Raisman and Blake Leeper, and they shared a lot of inspirational quotes and stories on there. So I just gave a few of their quotes there. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Anyone have any questions for Jen? She covered a lot of material in a very short amount of time.
And I could share the deck because it has access to all the recordings on Salesforce Plus.
I think everyone is so overwhelmed with all the information you shared. That's why they don't have any questions.
I was going to ask, I'm really excited about the code builder. So that seems really cool. That is still coming. So I still got some people on the Dev Console planning to expose some of the Visual Studio Code. So it's really cool. There's a online version.
Yeah, and then you don't have to keep getting updates and all that.
Yeah. Awesome.
I can tell you that I am super curious to learn more about the elimination of change sets. I don't care what it's called, and I don't care where you need to access it. But if it's native to Salesforce and it means never having to do a change set again, I'm in.
A long time coming for
Oh.
sure.
David, did anybody ever respond to your? I remember right after you started watching the Dreamforce sessions, you were saying this is the time for own backup to say what their differentiator is going to be from the native backup announcement from Salesforce. Anybody bite on that?
The thing is that Salesforce has not really given enough detail unless Jen knows more or anyone else knows more than I do. They really haven't given a whole lot more detail other than sharing here's a concept, an idea that we will be rolling out soon, but nothing beyond that. And on backup, also like it's they sort of catch 22, but they call themselves on backup. They suffer the same fate as Salesforce, that they have the word sales in the name of the product, in the name of the company, that people automatically assume it's only for sales. So own backup also includes a lot more than backup. It's definitely their core foundational offering that they have, but they actually provide like a whole lot more than just backups of your data. And even when we talk about backups of the data, like how far back and accessible by whom, and what is the retrieval process like, and the offering that Salesforce will provide, how much of it is going to be free for, and on what editions of Salesforce, and at what point is like maybe is it going to be freemium, and at what point do people have to pay, and what is that going to cost? So it doesn't necessarily, it is definitely a big wow moment, but it does not necessarily mean that on backup is irrelevant in any way at all.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a sales deal with them right now. This is the third time in the last 18 months I've done a sales deal, like a third company I worked for. So it's still very relevant. And with the new product coming out, it's exciting, but at the same time, there's just some questions on the wall, right? So I personally didn't get enough from the first demo that Salesforce did. I suspect a lot more is going to come next year. And they've also acquired a company called RevCult, which is very interesting. If you're interested in Salesforce security, definitely check out RevCult. There's some interesting products they do with Shield and with protecting your environment. So as David said, on backup is a bit more than just backup. And I think next year they're also looking to do Microsoft as well. So they're going to jump into a space outside of Salesforce.
And also for those of you who have been in the Salesforce ecosystem long enough, I mentioned this in the post that Vanessa was referring to. Did my camera just go
Yes,
bonkers?
your camera is
I'm having a freaking technology meltdown today.
It's max headroom over there.
Interesting.
All right, let's see what happens now. I reset my, oh, great. Yeah, I reset my camera. We'll see what happens. So for those of you who have been in, I'm waiting for my camera to reboot and I'll turn it back on. For those of you who have been in the Salesforce space long enough, you might recall when Salesforce announced the drag and drop capability of storing files, and it was at Dreamforce. And there's a booth for Dropbox, there's a booth for Box.com. And I remember going directly right over to the booth for Box.com, like, what the hell does this mean for you guys? I'm using Box. I love Box and the integration with Salesforce. Does it mean it's going to be completely irrelevant? And they're like, we don't really know. And here we are many years later, it's not a replacement for Google Drive or SharePoint or Dropbox or Box.com. And if you think back to the release of Quip, so Jen, you might have been invited to the dress rehearsal for that year also, were you, in Boston for Mark's dress rehearsal?
Maybe.
Apparently, that was the only time I was invited. So the year that Mark announced, at Dreamforce announced Quip, I was invited to, apparently he does these dress rehearsals a couple of weeks before Dreamforce, where about 15 to 20 people are invited to a conference room in a hotel in a certain geographic area. And my understanding is he does it throughout the US and other parts of the world as well, this like road show. I remember I was there with Cheryl Feldman, and there were, like, I'm sitting across the table from like the CEO of Pitney Bowes. I'm sitting right next to the head of marketing for Weight Watchers. And in between me and him is Mark Benioff. So Mark Benioff basically did a dress rehearsal of the entire keynote from Dreamforce. And he basically said, I want you to take notes. I'm going to do the entire thing. I'm going to take notes. I want you to take notes. And afterwards, I'm going to go around the table, ask all of you for unfiltered feedback. I want to hear your feedback now before we get on the big stage. Anyway, pretty much the entire time, all he talked about for a long time. All he talked about was Quip. And so he turned to the person next to him, which was the head of marketing at Weight Watchers, a French guy. He was like very reserved. He had part of his personality. Me also, he was the first one to be asked to speak, and he didn't have a whole lot to say. And then Mark turned to me and he goes, "Okay, David." And I'm like, "All right, Mark, here you are. I'm sitting here. I'm a technology guy. I totally understand technology. All you've been doing is talking about Quip. And after all of this time, I'm still here wondering, I don't know what Quip is. I don't know if is this a replacement for Chatter? Is it a replacement for Google Docs? Is it a replacement for Evernote? I'm not sure. You talked about it in a whole, like so many different contexts. And I'm still here wondering, what is this thing Quip after you spoke so much? I said, I think what you need to do is take a business case of here's a problem that we've seen our customers experience and we have a solution for it. And the solution is called Quip. Let me show you how that solution is solved by using Quip. Then it will make sense. Because right now I'm super confused and I was paying close attention the entire time. So I'm bringing that up now because when Quip was announced, nobody was really like, does that mean we don't need Microsoft Word anymore or Google Docs or Evernote? And no, those things still have a place also. There are some things that Quip does really well. These other tools, most of us are still using some of those other tools as well. So
Mhm.
I think when it comes to backing up, we'll see.
It will definitely be a different landscape in 12 months from now.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I still don't understand what to use Quip for. I'm supposed to implement it now too, and I'm still trying to figure it all out.
So I recently discovered that you could do some I haven't had a chance to do it yet. Amazingly cool merging of documents. So you can have a template similar to Conga or an in-text draw loop where you can have template documents, the equivalent of a Microsoft Word document, and set up with merge codes in advance. And basically you click a button and it will turn it into a document, I believe, that can then also be turned into exported as either a PDF or Microsoft Word document. That's very cool. That's very powerful. It's also a couple years later. And most of us don't even know that these features exist.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I did one use case where it was actually, I was working with Salesforce. So they preferred that it got set up in a Quip document, but
Yeah.
basically it was an Excel document. And what we were doing was managing a number of email domains. I was with L'Oreal at the time. We had over 100 email domains going through Salesforce, and they wanted us to enable some sender ID, like some policy stuff for our emails to raise our caps in the environment for like Service Cloud users. So basically, it was like over 100 domains, and I had to go through a process to do some feature enablement for this, both with our DNS records. And bottom line is, I sat there in a document, I was updating like rows, and it would interactively tell the end users on their end as I was working on it. And also I would get the updates as well if they made a change.
Yeah.
So it was like working in an Office document, honestly. And I saw those features too, David. It was really nice. I could go export to Excel, export to PDF. Really good.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments from anything Jen shared?
I wanted to comment on one thing, and Jen, I think you hit it on the nail. The architect keynote that they had talked about all these awesome resources that are going to be available now. And yes, it's not just for people who are going down the CTA path. It's for people, like everyday business analysts, admins, that they architect solutions. And for them to have some of those resources available, I think are going to be awesome. That's a great benefit.
Yep. Anything else? Comments, questions?
I think we're all going to be busy next year as workflow rules and process filters need to be looked at. So I'm excited to see this migration utility. That's going to maybe take a little bit of pain.
Yeah, I will say I'm working on a Sales Cloud implementation right now. And after the announcement came out, I was like, oh no, are we gonna have to backtrack on any process builders that we've built up to this point? Is the client gonna say, oh no, I heard that we're just supposed to do flows now? So now I'm like, I don't know, is everybody else just like stopping? Are you gonna deal with that later?
Yeah.
No, I think like a lot of things, if they already exist and they just need some minor modification, I think now folks are like weighing, all right, how long will it take me to rebuild this workflow in a flow? And what are the business requirements? Because if the business requirements are still very rudimentary and simple, and the workflow rule itself is very rudimentary and simple, and I'm really overwhelmed with from a time management perspective, I'm just going to update the workflow rule and deal with it another time. Just put it off. But if on the flip side, and I think most of us have seen this when it comes to anything, even, oh, can you create a checkbox for me? And a couple of weeks later, it turns into, oh, but here's all of our other business requirements that we thought we told you when we asked for the checkbox. So when any of us, I think, encounter that with an existing workflow rule or process builder, we're not going to hesitate to be like, all right, we're going to do this again as a flow. So, and that's fair. And
I'm also curious to see where approval processes are going to go because they use workflow events. If you're going to get rid of workflow, what's that impact going to be on approval processes? And when is that actually going to come into the picture?
I'm willing to bet that's going to be like the redheaded stepchild that lingers and ends up being the last thing that comes over, because with approvals, the record gets locked until it's approved or rejected. And so many people have been asking for that kind of functionality with other use cases. And there's some unique behind the scenes functionality around that for sure.
Yeah, policies haven't been touched in like how long?
So I think the last thing I remember was when they came up with the diagram where they could actually show you the diagram of the flow. That was going to be that's the nice new thing about approval process.
I have to say, before I joined Salesforce, so this was way before I even knew workflow was going away. I had some free time, and in my org, we had a lot of workflow rules. So what I ended up doing in my spare time was I'm going to start moving those to flow if I can, a record trigger flow. And where I realized, because those workflow rules have been kicking around for over 5 years, that as I was moving things over and testing them, and I had questions about why this was set up the way it was, because it conflicts with some other stuff. And a lot of times, for those of you who will eventually need to migrate, don't migrate as is, because as you're going through them, I went through the process and I'm asking questions and I'm like, oh, it doesn't need to do what it needs to do in that workflow. We don't even use that. I'm like, but it still exists in the org. And that was my opportunity to say, oh, we don't need this. Let's do away with it. And I was able to clean out and delete a bunch of workflow roles. So I highly recommend, as you're moving them, don't just lift and shift, but take a look to see if it really needs to be there. Because if it's been there for a while, chances are the people who put them in place aren't even there. And then the other people don't even know that those things are even happening.
So true. 100%.
So I'm also looking at it in terms of even at a higher level. A lot of people early on got in trouble with triggers, having multiple triggers on objects, and basically needing to put in ways to deal with that. Well, I could see a similar thing with flows. Are we supposed to have multiple before trigger and after trigger flows, or are you supposed to roll those all into one? Is this where the flow orchestrator starts to come in? There's lots of things to look at before you even start your conversion. We've got several things with dozens of workflows, and how does that all get transitioned into, along with your process builders that are also running on the same object and not collide with triggers and everything else? Looking, what is that kind of higher level view to start building it before you even start converting things over? And I'm certain whatever tools they put in place are probably not going to look at this level of converting it over.
Yeah. Another piece of advice as you move things over, and just because you might be making a change directly to the record that triggered it, so that would be a before save, you also have to consider the order of execution as you move things in, because a record triggered before save happens before the apex save, and the apex after save, and the record triggered after save happens, like, I think either like after process builder or workflow rules. So you really have to understand where you want that actual change to happen, because if you have, like you said, apex triggers happening, process builder, workflow rules, it could potentially impact your expected outcome of it. I know the team is when they're looking at the conversion tools are looking at where things place in the order of execution in terms of whether you have one before save, one after save per object. It really depends. And that's the answer that the PM team has been providing. It really depends on if you are concerned with the order of your various flow components. If you are, then you would put it in one record triggered flow, but use the subflows. So you have a decision point and then a subflow so you can manage that order. But if you work in a org that has multiple business units and those business units want to control their own destiny, you could potentially have in that one object before say flow for this one business unit, and they control the order of things that happen for that one business unit. So it could be by record type, for example, and then this other business can control it. At John Hancock, we had this huge insurance org that had 10 different business units, and we really didn't want people to like stumble over one another. Plus, if you're touching something, then everybody has the regression test. But if you're able to isolate it, then you make the change and you only really regression test your business unit piece. So in terms of designing, it really depends on the complexity of your org, how you want to design it. And we're in the process because we know that question has been posed a lot of times. We're in the process of updating the architect guide for record triggered flows, and that will eventually make it in there. Someone just has to actually put hands on keyboard to get that in there.
Hello, everybody. Very nice to see everybody. I'm sorry I was late. And I just wanted to add to the conversation. Jen, great valid points. And the one thing I would add is it also depends on the complexity, and also it depends on how many users you have and how many times they are pulling up a record. So in the end, do you need an optimization overall in your organization to not hit those limits as an org? If you are in that space, then it would probably make sense for you to create a couple of different before save flows and narrow down your entry criteria, start criteria, so that you won't have to launch every time those automations. But if you're not that big and if you're not needing those optimizations, probably it makes more sense for you to try to come up with an after save flow trigger factory type of deal where you organize everything, because now you have subflows. This is something that Jen has been asking for, and then she joined Salesforce and she delivered it.
You can't take the credit for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you, Salesforce. So that obviously makes things much more manageable if you go back in later on and see what's really happening around that object. So it just depends. But my take on this one, if your entry criteria are mutually exclusive, meaning you have all these different tail cases you want to do things on, and you test it, you can have multiple before save triggers on this. I don't think you should narrow yourself down to one. And then obviously, if you have the same record updates, those would be in your before save. And if you're doing related record updates, those would be your after save. So it is possible to have multiple, as like with anything else, you just got to test it really well. Mike is asking, what is the governor limits for flow? Is the main thing I've been struggling to find out. I can tell you the ones I know. First of all flow transactions are subject to all governor limits. If you pull up the governor limits, obviously you have to stay within those. And it's important to know, not everybody realizes that when you're talking about before save and after save flows, your order of execution in the transaction, including your before save flows, after save flows, your workflow rules, processes, apex triggers, they all run in one single transaction. If you have a transaction happening and you have all these automations coming together, you have that like case where everything is launching on that record, you need to worry about the governor limits as a whole, not only for your flow. So that makes this whole thing very complicated. We have very technical people on the coding side, for example, they still get stopped when they look at the whole picture because flow comes into effect and workflow and everything. The one thing I know that which Narendra talks about a lot is I think a flow overall can only evaluate in one interview 2,000 elements. So if you go over 2,000 elements, it is going to fail. And that's the scenario where you have loop within the loop and things like that. Once you have all those, that is the scenario that can cause that. And in general, loop within the loop scenarios are not great for flow to solve anyway. Once you're talking about that, you leverage Apex to do that because Apex has a lot of traversing capabilities that flow doesn't have. They don't need to get everything that you need to get in flow. Like you might not have to query things that you query in flow in Apex. And by the way, mentioning that unofficial SF has great solutions for that. Now they have collection comparisons and things like that, which is a huge help. You can get records and all the related field values, and now you can compare them leveraging Apex package, workable Apex package that you can install from unofficial SF and look at the matching results, whether there are differences or what are the common records and things like that. The other thing is the interview cannot be more than 1 MB, or the flow cannot be more than 1 MB. There is talk about that. And I think Salesforce just lately added that to one of their help pages. To be honest with you, I don't know what that means. The flow cannot be too big, but it's not really something you can look at and measure either. You're just going to hit it at some point. So there are some interesting things in there.
Andy, since you started speaking, you're one of our panelists. Dreamforce 21. What was it like? You were there in person. Vanessa hasn't chimed in yet either. But what was it like? Come on, you were missing about 180,000 people over there.
Yeah, for me, it was very interesting because I've been in the ecosystem interacting with people for a couple of years now. And I've been quite active, coincided with the start of the pandemic period. And I think I made quite good use of my time through the pandemic because I like to leverage social channels a lot, video. And then at that point, we even had Clubhouse, Vanessa. There was such a thing at that time. We have actually come together with people virtually quite a bit. I've done a lot of Trailblazer user groups, Salesforce Saturday meetings, all virtual. And all of a sudden, obviously, all these user groups, because they are virtual, they just became international. So it didn't really matter which one you joined or which one you presented at. I did not expect to go to Dreamforce this year at all. And all of a sudden I got that email quite late, a couple of rounds later, because I was, they call it alumni lightning champion or platform champion or something like that. A position I was fired from, but still I got an invite. So I'm quite grateful for that.
It's still better than me. I'm a retired applicant. I didn't even get to the champion part.
Yeah. So interesting one. Because I don't work Salesforce, I can say things like that. Sorry about that. That's the luxury I can enjoy. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go. My wife was like, you have to go. You've been obsessing about Salesforce. You have to go. And the one thing that was great for me is the fact that I have to pay for my own travel and I didn't have to compete with 100,000 people. So it was quite easy to get hotel rooms and buy plane tickets. It was relatively cheap. It was interesting. I just had to do one too many Q-tips in my nose and nostril, but whatever. But I don't really mind it that much. And when I went over there, quite small, and all these people that I've been interacting with, all these superstars like yourselves, many of them were already there. It was a great opportunity for me. And many of them knew me even virtually. So it was great. It was a great opportunity for me to interact with people. Some people even wanted selfies with me and they wanted to talk to me because they knew me from virtual world, which was really weird. I went to register. I ran into David New and we had a chat over there. And that day, everybody was coming in doing registrations. You know what? We said, we had a group, like a Twitter group going. So we said, why don't we meet for brunch or lunch or something like that? So everybody started coming in and it was like, all stars. It was amazing. So we had lunch, we chatted and we socialized. And then the next day we had all these presentations. It was just a very nice event for me. We've had a couple of evening events sponsored by like some of the solution providers, and some songs were delivered over there. Some stories were shared, and it was overall a very good event. If I obviously need to talk about the content and what the messages were all about.
But there was content?
There is also content, but let's mention that a little bit. It's a Salesforce user group event after all, so I need to also mention that. First of all, obviously I'm biased. It was very important for me that Salesforce shared now we are retiring workflow rules and processes. Even I was surprised. I didn't expect such an announcement this early, this clear. Many of you know me. I have a YouTube channel. I have a Udemy class. And the intro of my Udemy class, the description says, Salesforce shared in 2020 that they are no longer going to develop workflow rules and process builders. And believe it or not, in the course reviews, I get a lot of criticism about my description not being correct. I think people don't believe it. Salesforce clarified that. It was very important and bold statement. So like many of us know, Salesforce doesn't shut off things easy, like Classic still lives on. But it was an important message to tell people, you know what, maybe you should stop learning flow. And I always say, I've been focusing on that before it was cool. And before me, Jennifer and all the other greats out there. I'm rather new. And the other important message is whenever we saw any presentation, any demo, it was related to Slack. And we expected that, obviously. And then whenever Slack was shown, a screen flow just popped inside the Slack window. That was also another one. Constantly flows interacting inside Slack with the users. This was the general message. You know how these things are. You watch these things and you're like, this just happens so easy. Like it just magically happens. But when I try to set these things up, they are not that easy. And it turns out it's not big yet either. It's quite exciting. Now, the one thing that I should say is I've been dealing with CRM systems a lot and I've been doing implementations and this and that. I actually think about the social aspect or the user aspect of CRM quite a bit. And I think when people look at these announcements, some people are missing the point. This transition is actually quite important. People evaluate this sometimes for, we have Chatter. How much better can Slack be? Why are we replacing Slack with Chatter and how do they compare with each other? I think the change is not about that. The change is about the fact that people live in their chat windows and we need to bring Salesforce to their chat windows. So it's not about Salesforce actually presenting data in another format, in another view. So Chatter is great. Chatter is almost inexistent. It doesn't really exist on mobile. The mobile representation of Salesforce is overall weak. So Slack actually gives a huge opportunity for Salesforce to strengthen the mobile presence and the interactive experience to their users. So obviously, setting the vision is extremely important and delivering the vision is even more important. So that comes next. So we don't really know whether that's going to be hugely successful, mediocre, or it's going to fail. That obviously comes next. But if you ask me, the vision that was set was very exciting. And as a side note, if you not spend a lot of time building ERDs and diagrams and things like that, you might think, and if you've not spent a lot of time on Lucid charts, you might think that announcement is not important. But for the people who need that announcement was huge. The fact that you can open Lucid chart and then you have all these icons and diagrams and ready prepared ERDs and things like that. I haven't opened that yet. I'm quite excited. So that makes things easy because conceptualizing and designing data models and Salesforce implementations is quite important. Thank you.
Andy, thank you for sharing your insights. And you just shared something that is so incredibly important. Basically, it's about change management and the messaging that you happen to have brought it up as it relates to Slack and people asking, but how is this different than Chatter? We already have Chatter. What do we need Slack for? And this issue of it's really how to handle change management, in my mind, is so incredibly important for any Salesforce professional. Because any new enhancement. It could be a new enhancement that has nothing to do with technology. It has to do with business processes. It has to do with streamlining the user interface. It could be anything even coming from a compliance or regulatory perspective. A change is being shoved down our throat. We're even resistant to it. But when people respond with that negativity, I often think of it as, I imagine people like hands on their hips or arms folded. Well, what do we need this for? I could just imagine the first people who saw not even a computer, a word processor. Oh, what do I need that for? I have a typewriter that doesn't even need to get plugged in. Like your word processor. What was that, Jen?
Or a smartphone.
That's right. Or a smartphone. And understanding and even being ahead of the curve to understand goes back to what I was mentioning before, that sort of like problem solution, to understand here are the problems that you're currently experiencing. Let's not gloss over them. I'm not even saying that those problems are doom and gloom. You might not even realize that these are problems because you've always done it this way, because you haven't even seen what's possible. Once you see what's possible, it's not that we're chasing after new technology just for the sake of something shiny, something new. But once we realize that this is possible, we realize that the way we've been doing it up until now is a problem. And this is a solution. And take Bluetooth, for example. I mean, I can come up with a million examples. But as Salesforce admins, developers, project managers in the Salesforce ecosystem, BAs in the Salesforce ecosystem, this is a critical point that you brought out that I think everyone needs to not only be mindful of, but to learn how to deal with it. Because in the end, if you don't deal with it, to Andy's point, companies invest millions of dollars in new technology and licensing and migrating data and customizing things and doing the end user training, and user adoption is very low because these change management issues were never addressed, and everything will be anyway. I'll stop rambling about it. I just wanted to applaud you for bringing it up and highlighting that everyone should focus on that.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions on anything Andy said? He shared a lot.
I just want to complain. Hey, Andy, good to see you. I want to complain officially with an audience with 30 witnesses that you came to California and you didn't give me a call. Because we had an agreement that we eat something good together when we get close to each other.
You know what? I didn't even think of it. It was so hectic. I apologize.
I forgive you. And I still love you. And I can't.
Well, I'm in Istanbul.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, thanks for that note, Louis.
That's very funny. All right, Vanessa, you're up.
I'm up. All right. Sorry about that. I'm back getting myself settled. Yeah. And I don't know that anybody was really excited to hear my excitement about specific Salesforce announcements. I'm not really known as like a huge technical person in the Salesforce ecosystem. So most of my stories are probably just going to be more experience related because that's really what I took out of Dreamforce. I, very similar to Andy, really only got into the ecosystem when the pandemic hit. I think that's around the time that I met David and we worked together for a hot minute. And for me, being in all of these virtual events for Salesforce, it was a very like family reunion vibe. Like it was almost like meeting like 100 internet friends all at the same time because I'd really never met these people before. Like I remember there was the first night I was there, some guy in a Trailblazer hoodie just said, "Hey, Vanessa," and he gave me a hug and then he walked away. And I spent about a half an hour on my phone on LinkedIn trying to find his profile photo so I could put the person to the picture. Or there was somebody that introduced themselves and they said, "Hey, it's Joe." And I was like, "Hi, Joe." Yes. And he gave me his last name and I was like, "Hi." And then I was like, hold on. And then I had to look him up on LinkedIn and the profile photo was really oh, you're that guy. I think it was maybe a little bit easier for folks that had been in the ecosystem for a while because I only had to meet a few of the new folks that had popped up in the last year. But it was like almost not overload because I'm an extrovert, but it was a lot for me. So the few things that I wanted to highlight, the COVID protocols were outstanding and really made a safe space for everybody. We had to take an at-home test on Thursday, an at-home test on Friday, and we had to drop off an in-person test on Monday and then do another test on Tuesday. And so since the entire thing was outdoors, other than the restrooms, and everybody had to do the same protocols, like one, it was weird because leading up to it, there were a few people that maybe you were on, Slack groups with or in Twitter groups, and a few people had to fall off because the results got messed up. There was even somebody from my company who literally flew to Dreamforce, but one of his tests didn't get processed properly, and so he couldn't even get into the event. So everybody that was there, everybody felt very good about hugging. There were even little pins that whether you were a hugger or give me an elbow or a handshake will do. I will say those were hard to read. So I wish they did masks that way because nobody was like, hold on, let me see which pin you have. So that was a little awkward when you'd like hug an elbow person, be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. So that awkwardness a little bit. Also, with it being such a small space where it was like kind of like classroom style because it's a regular Dreamforce, and I've been to 2 other Dreamforces. You maybe catch somebody for 3 minutes as somebody's walking 3 blocks that way and you're walking 3 blocks that way, and you might never see them again for the rest of Dreamforce. And this, everybody was in the same space. So really to walk from one end of things, and it was maybe about, I think it was like a block, maybe it was just a block, right? Like a street. And to get from one end to the other, you just keep running into like person you knew after person you knew after person you knew after person you knew. And there were golden hoodies everywhere. That was the other thing. It's like there was like gold everywhere. Ooh. And it's the concept of the Salesforce celebrities, just like Salesforce celebrities left and right, which if you're new to the ecosystem was pretty exciting for me. Let me say, I was too afraid to ask David Liu for a selfie, but I did get one when he was in the background, kind of like on the sly. The other things that were exciting for me, I really got into the user experience designer stuff. They launched that certification back in June. And I've been a big fan of it. I think coming from more of a business analysis background, I tend to find that on a lot of the projects that I've been on, when I'm writing business requirements, you give them to the technical folks, they build out the business requirements, but you can't really user experience design items into user stories very well. Like you really just need somebody who's going to look at everything holistically and look at the people experience and look at the user interface. And you don't want to, it shouldn't take a user story to say, I need the fields to be in the best spot for the users. I just ended up taking on a lot of those duties in my projects. And so when the user experience designer certification came out, I jumped on it. And there was the first night that I was there, they actually had a reception where you could meet the chief design officer of Salesforce, Justin McGuire. I went there for half an hour. I did not get to meet him. He wasn't there yet. I had 2 tacos and then went to Foo Fighters because my priorities are totally messed up. But either way, I was excited that there was a reception and a real big push for user experience designer stuff. I had a nice conversation with Adam Doty, who was pretty integral on coming up with the certification. And for me, I felt the certification itself was maybe a little bit on the easy side. It struck me as it had some very kind of basic administrator questions because you don't want somebody to just come in from a design background, earn a Salesforce certification without actually knowing some Salesforce. But they also wanted it to be user experience design enough that you couldn't just know Salesforce user interface things and pass the test without learning some design stuff. But it watered down I would say the certification a bit. So I was excited to hear from Adam that it's really just the base level certification exam, that there's plans for the upcoming year to have much more specialized certifications. So having a B2B certification or a certification maybe for Experience Cloud as far as user experience design or B2C. So those are the things that are in the work that I was excited to hear, that it was really just like, it wasn't just this is it and everybody should pay attention to user experience design, that this is just rather stage 1. And this is going to be a continual push from Salesforce to make sure that user experience is considered in every project.
They said there are dynamic forms in that exam. Is that
Not that I remember. I don't think I had to study dynamic forms on.
okay?
They have a lot of user interface items. It overlapped a lot, I thought, with platform apps. So knowing navigation and path and guidance for success and in-app guidance and those kinds of user interface items, what the capabilities are. And also there's a lot of Salesforce Lightning Design System questions because it's also a test for folks that build apps on the Salesforce platform. Their admin isn't a prerequisite for that particular exam. There are no prerequisites for that exam. So it was a little bit of everything, which, like I said, made it feel a little watered down. But now that I know that it's part 1 of whatever the more honed down certifications are going to be in the future was nice to know. Yeah, I think all the push for designing for people as opposed to business requirements is something I definitely felt when I was at Salesforce. But that's my experience, and those are the sessions that I went to. But that was the takeaway that I got, is that we don't want to build just for business requirements. We don't want to build necessarily just an MVP, because the reality is there's not an end user that, yay, MVP. It's people want to have a good experience right out the gate. And we need to keep those users in mind as we're building things. Other things that I noticed, I loved the Stacy Cogswell sessions. She did a couple of campfire sessions, actually, and they had 3 or 4 campfire sessions going on at any time. What was nice was at Dreamforce, it wasn't, while there was a sea of golden hoodies, there just weren't a whole lot of us. I'm not a golden hoodie on anything. I'm a lay person, but it was nice that there was a mix of everybody. You had, oh, look, Salesforce celebrities, but then there was also people who had never gotten certified. Like one of my mentees that's in Climb Hire, I saw him on day 1. He's like, oh my God, Vanessa, you're here. And it was nice to see even like the folks that are very new to the ecosystem feel like reinvigorated. Like these are folks that have never been to a Dreamforce before, had no idea. Like I never heard of Dreamforce last year, probably, but some of them maybe got impacted by the pandemic, looking for a career pivot. And so that there were sessions like the imposter syndrome sessions, where there was material that was not just, hey, architects, look what you can do in Lucid Chart, which was exciting. Don't get me wrong. I've already been playing with some of those things as I try to learn how to diagram and be a solution architect, which somehow I am for some reason. But it was nice to also see that there was lots of things for the folks that maybe aren't as comfortable on the platform, learning how to describe your experience. Like one of the things you said is, when you look at your experience, don't look at it as, oh, I've only been an admin for 1 year. Like you should be like, oh my God, I've been an admin for a year. Look at where I'm at now versus where I was a year ago. And those types of sessions I thought were pretty inspirational. And I was happy to see a lot of folks that I've tried to mentor along the way get a lot of value out of just being at Dreamforce, connecting with people, even getting a few leads for jobs. That was awesome to see the real mix of people, that it wasn't just you had to have a golden hoodie or be an MVP to be there. There were a lot of different folks. The other little takeaways, I'm still trying to figure out the whole Dreamforce Plus, like new shows. That it kind of felt like we got like previews of, oh, this show is coming up, Awesome Admin Show or what. So that'll be interesting. That was the Salesforce being Netflix thing. I'm curious to see where that goes. Salesforce Ranch was another one that I was like, I wasn't expecting to hear about a ranch. Is it going to be like Salesforce Disney? The idea that there's going to be a place with everybody working remotely that is going to feel maybe Dreamforce all the time, but on a ranch setting. So I thought that was an interesting announcement. Maybe these are not going to
Confused. Wait, what?
There's going to be a Salesforce Ranch.
A physical
Yeah.
destination, a
Yeah.
real place.
Yes.
That part.
I work at Salesforce and I don't even know what that is. Like, it's been mentioned several times in employee town halls that there'd be a ranch, but you don't know where this thing is. Who gets to go to it?
I got the sense that it might be Salesforce employees, but then that's rude to just bring that up in Dreamforce, be like, what, we can't go to, I want to go to the Salesforce Ranch.
Any of speech was actually quite amazing. I hit a tower. It's over there somewhere. I had a tower, and I have many towers all over the place, but all of them are empty. And then he started talking about the veg. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I heard about the ranch. Brett and Sarah and Parker were talking about it in one of the little campground spaces. And it's just like you're saying, they want to provide an environment. They mentioned that it would start out with maybe the idea of all new Salesforce employees go to the ranch, and that's where they go through their orientation, et cetera, get them there, a space that's happy and family may be able to come. I don't know. They didn't know where it was going to be. So it still sounds like it's pie in the sky, but they seem intent on putting the funding and implementing something along those lines. Sounds interesting. I'm curious to see what it'll end up like.
So by the way, I just Googled the words Salesforce Ranch, and I'm going to put the URL for the Google search itself, because I want you to see what I'm seeing. And apparently this was a thing that started in May and June, and
Yeah, they mentioned an idea, which I think it was General Electric, and Jen, you could chime in here from off base, but the idea was that General Electric had a
Ville.
facility. Yes.
I
Yeah.
was there. Yeah.
We're there. So you're familiar with,
I was a GE employee. Yeah.
exactly.
That's okay. So
That was the idea. I started to hear that idea. And then all of a sudden they jumped right to Salesforce Ranch. So they primed it around the GE concept.
So what GE had was, if anyone ever watched 30 Rock, I was never an avid watcher of 30 Rock. I worked most of the years that 30 Rock was on TV. I was a GE employee, and every once in a while I'd see snippets of episodes. I'm like, oh my God, they're taking like internal humor and internal like employee like terminology, and people find that funny. That's just weird. So there was a lot of like very realistic stuff that they showed on 30 Rock all the time. Crotonville is a facility. It's in northern New York City. So it's in like the White Plains, Westchester area. And it's basically designed like a college campus kind of a thing, where they have like these dormitory, but really made like hotel rooms and dining facility and beautiful like jogging trails and tennis courts and all kinds of other facilities. And GE employees are selected to go there for courses where the employee doesn't have to pay anything. And basically it's a food fest. And when you're going there for a course, the course is usually like a week or 2 weeks, sometimes several weeks long. And you're in jail. You're not allowed to go home even on weekends. You're not allowed to go home. You're like, you have to stay there, which is just really bizarre. And very often they hosted executives from other companies, from GE customers or prospects, to come there for all kinds of like really important presentations and brainstorming sessions and things like that, like to solve like big problems. So that's what Crotonville was about. If Salesforce is thinking of doing something like that, okay, that's, I guess.
I didn't get any of the Hotel California vibes. It sounded like a happy place, but I guess we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. It was certainly one of those things I wasn't expecting to hear. But I will say, and just to give you the real layperson at Dreamforce experience, when we got there, you have to imagine, I'm bad at guesstimating how many people were allowed to sit there for the opening keynote, but it was a bunch of fold out chairs. And I think Mark spoke for 2 hours. And it was interesting because when you get people that are like psyched about Dreamforce, like Mark comes out and like people like lose their minds. And that was neat. Just lost their minds. And then the shoes. My Twitter feed went bananas as soon as the shoes were unveiled. But we're all sitting there and it's these fold out chairs. And after about 2 hours, my thighs were on fire because you don't want to touch the person sitting next to you. But the chairs are so narrow that after 2 hours, you're just like quivering just because you're like, "Argh!" Like it's tough to sit there for. But thankfully, the weather was lovely. The information was interesting. Lionel Richie was cool. It was nice when he came out. The folks in front of me, Vanessa Thomas, was there. Like, these are people, like, you got to imagine the keynote's like the first thing that people go to. So it's not like people have had a whole lot of time to make friends at this Dreamforce at this point. But the whole row that was in front of me was all like this, like going back and forth during easy like Sunday morning. And I was like, this is the stuff that we miss from not doing these in-person sessions, just jamming out to Lionel Richie at a Dreamforce and touching each other and hugging and like meeting cool Salesforce strangers. And then, of course, I will close with my favorite is, so the Foo Fighters got announced. And I am a super fan, like a hardcore super fan. And Stacy Cogswell had made a recommendation that I should say something about it on Twitter. And then she says, you never know when the Salesforce fairies are going to be. And when Foo Fighters had played Dreamforce in 2015, that was one of the Dreamforces that I'd gone to. I skipped all the food and the free beer so I could run right up and get right in the front of the barricade. And I ugly cried during Everlong as Dave Grohl's on his throne. So I got a drumstick and a set list. And I still have my Dreamforce 2015 photo of me holding my set list and my drumstick. And so I told that story on Twitter. And then the Salesforce fairies heard and said, would you like to do the Dreamforce Plus interview pre-show for the Foo Fighters? So that was a big deal for me. Sorry, Chief Design Officer Justin McGuire, I'm going to leave you so I can do this Dreamforce Plus interview where they very awkwardly asked me to give a message to Dave Grohl, which I'm sure Dave Grohl never heard. But there I was, my pouring my 16-year-old heart out to Dave Grohl to a bunch of strangers on Dreamforce Plus while people on LinkedIn are emailing me and saying, hey, I just saw somebody I knew on LinkedIn on talking about Dave Grohl on Dreamforce Plus. So that was exciting. The problem with doing the pre-show, though, was that the crowd had already built up at the stage because I was there right before the show. And I was like, oh no, I didn't get my shot to get right up front. And so and it was all of a sudden, and this was the power of the Ohana for me, where enough people had just kept up with my little Foo Fighter story that I heard right at the front. It's Vanessa, let her up. And it was like almost the sea of people parted so that I could walk front and center to claim my place at the front of the Foo Fighters. And it was such a small show. And I don't know if people saw any of the video. If you haven't, I totally recommend you go watch it. But after about like the second or third song, Einstein and Astro started coming through the crowd, and Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters asked them to come up on the stage, and they all started like jamming out. It was like Ruth and Cody and Astro and Einstein, like all jamming out to the Foo Fighters. And it was an amazing show. And then after the show ended, the drummer threw his sticks out and the guy next to me dove for the stick. And I was like, good for him. He went upside down. I thought he was going to get a concussion. And he came out and he handed me the drumstick. And I was like, it's the Ohana. And I ugly cried again. That was my second ugly cry moment for the Foo Fighters, that this guy who I just met literally the day before, but just through this Salesforce ecosystem, was like, this is Vanessa, who clearly likes the Foo Fighters. I'm going to risk my brain to get her Taylor Hawkins drumstick. And that was like the perfect marriage of my personal life and my professional life all together in one. So that was my big Dreamforce experience. I think that pretty much covers all my personal stuff.
God, that's crazy. And now I'm seeing that my camera froze on me, but whatever. Look, I can speak without moving my lips.
Yeah. Actually, one other little thing I'll throw out was I think a few folks ended up coming to Dreamforce thinking that they would either not necessarily get in, but maybe see people out in like was it the Yerba Gardens, but or whatever it is that right outside. And since it was all self-contained on that one block, like there was just nothing outside of Dreamforce. You pretty much hung out in there, and then that was that. So I felt bad for my one recruiter friend that was just like, I'm just going to sit out here, and I thought I would maybe network a little bit, but nope.
Actually, someone reached out to me before Dreamforce asking me what I thought of that. In other words, they were planning on doing that, and I'm like, don't waste your time. Like the security, like it's not happening.
You're not getting close. Yeah.
Vanessa, thank you for sharing your insights. Anyone have any questions or anything for Vanessa? I should say for Vanessa Grant. And we still have, even though they were not on the panel, we've got Barb and Vanessa Thomas, who were also there in person to share some insights. Anyone have any questions or anything for Vanessa Grant first?
So, Vanessa, I have one question. With the user experience design, the certification you took, was there anything that caught you by like surprise, or you were like, wow, this was like, I learned something that I didn't like it just had so much value, right? For doing the certification experience.
I thought that the material was something that would be valuable for really any admin, BA, anybody who might have any input into the ultimate layout of really any implementation of a Salesforce or Salesforce feature. The things that surprised me, I thought that the trail that they have to prepare for it was something like 40 hours of material. And the test really only scratched the surface of that material. I thought the material was very excessive for the certification, but I thought the material was important as far as understanding the value of the material was important, and especially the push for inclusivity in design was something that I don't think that gets talked about very much. So designing for inclusivity, even just down to colors and the difference between the background colors. And there was just the principles behind it. And also the Salesforce Lightning Design System. I don't think I've ever even looked at that website before. And so seeing all the ways that Salesforce has really done their best to even have a voice of Salesforce. I didn't know there was a voice of Salesforce, but when you look at the page and all the different little just the little bits that can be customized or that should be done a certain way so that it's the Salesforce way, I thought was really interesting to keep in mind, whether you're building an app or even just trying to implement Salesforce and things that you might be able to leverage, even just using code or whatever to there. I think when you're designing for Salesforce projects, knowing what features and customizations are available to you is really half the battle. You don't even necessarily need to know how to implement them, but just that they might be an idea if you're trying to brainstorm how to solve a problem is great. So I learned a lot in that respect.
Thank you. Thank you. Really good background.
You don't have anything else for Vanessa Grant? All right. Who wants to go next? Barb or Vanessa Thomas?
Go ahead, Vanessa.
I must say, I really wasn't planning on speaking at all today, but I guess why not seize the moment? I'll say that Dreamforce for me was just, it was such like a dream come true in the weirdest way where at Dreamforce, I could have said that 7 months prior, I had no idea what Salesforce was, period. And so coming from that point, ground zero to be certified, working in the ecosystem a few months at the time, and to end at the Dreamforce was just amazing. It was like something that I put on my bucket list that I would love to have had the opportunity to at some point in the future. And then to be presented with the opportunity was just amazing. It had essentially this like mixed vibe between the sleepaway camp when you're a kid, but like on a Disneyland size scale. And just a sense of community. The Ohana was, it felt so inclusive. It did feel like I was surrounded by these celebrities where how was I even like able to be there? How could I be in the midst of this greatness? And yet everyone was so welcoming, so helpful, just so I felt so embraced by the Ohana that it was just a great experience. So that's my greatest takeaway.
Awesome. I really enjoyed being there in person. And I know that probably several other people miss these events that we've been able to go to in the past, the world tours, the local events, the dreaming events, the other dream forces. This was my eighth dream force, and it was totally different, but still had the same vibe. When I walked into registration, and for those who have been to Dreamforce before, everything was on Howard Street. That was Dreamforce. One end of Howard Street to the other, outside. Inside the one building, you had registration. I walked in and there was one other person doing registration and about 25 people behind their little kiosks ready to welcome people through. It was really crazy. So it was weird because there was the volume of people were not there. But then yet you still had this whole Dreamforce environment and the Howard Street built up with trees and the campfire sort of sense. The people there were great. There were a lot of people that were like MVPs or platform champions, but there were also customers and people who have never been before. So it was a good mix. Really enjoyed it. I loved seeing some of the standard staples that have always been there. The community had a gratitude tree. For those who remember the gratitude trees we've had in the past, that was really pretty cool. So they brought in some of what Dreamforce used to be, yet they still opened it up and just had this openness because it was outdoors. We were really fortunate. The weather was just awesome. I heard they had a in case of rain, they had a plan, but they didn't take into consideration for a lot of extra sunshine, and it got pretty hot one day. And at the keynote, sitting there in what if you were in the sun section, as the sun moved around, it got pretty hot. But the content that I saw there in person that I really enjoyed were some of the small little campground spaces where they actually had individuals come in and talk. I think Stacy did something at one of those. You were talking about Stacy Cogswell Whitaker came in and did something there. There were a few of the people that presented in those particular small campgrounds. They also had one with Sarah Franklin. And then just as she's sitting there talking, up to the tent comes Parker Harris and Brett Taylor. They sat down and it was the three of them. And there were like 25 people there that were just listening and talking and asking questions. It was very candid. That probably some of the things I enjoyed the most was the smaller size, candid conversations that could take place that you don't always see in a regular Dreamforce. So there was a lot of Slack talk. Did definitely hear that. A lot about automation in Slack and seeing how that's all going to work going forward. Interesting. Don't know if that's going to take over the chatter world or not. I agree with a lot of the comments that everybody's made so far. And other than that, it was being able to see people in person was key. It was just so nice to be able to actually see some people in person that we haven't for a few years. So I really enjoyed it.
That's great. And everything that all for those of you who were there, like it makes a lot of sense. And for those of you who've ever been to Trailhead DX, has anyone here been to Trailhead DX? I see Jen is nodding.
Yeah, I actually prefer that to Dreamforce
Yeah.
because of that smaller,
Exactly.
much more people, not be in a big city wondering where you're going to get to next.
Yeah. Barb, have you ever been to Trailhead DX? Okay. So Trailhead DX, I went once. It was the year before COVID, and I completely fell in love. Like I felt like I went back in time to 5 or 8 or 10 years ago of what Dreamforce used to be like, where I would say there was a grand total of maybe 5,000 people. Jen or Jeff, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong on that
Oh,
estimate.
that's about right. That's about right.
And everything was just in one building in Moscone West, if I remember correctly. It was just like on different floors. So it was still sizable enough. It was the building, and the building was, there were a lot of people there. But you can actually see the carpet. You could actually have a conversation with someone. You can actually like just go to the bathroom without waiting online 20 minutes, which is like such a bizarre experience. And we were chatting before in the chat feed about the cost of a hotel to go to Dreamforce, how the prices have gotten crazy because the hotels caught on. During Trailhead DX, it's not outrageous. Just walking around in the street, you could totally cross the street without. So that experience was there. And so having gone to Trailhead DX a total of once in person, I'm like, I'm not going to Dreamforce ever again. I'm just going Trailhead DX and world tours and local community groups, and I'm done with Dreamforce because it is great, but it's so overwhelming and it's so expensive and it takes so much time. It's a full week and it's so draining. It's draining before you get on the plane to go there because you're going to be out for a week. So you're trying to scramble to catch up on everything. It's draining during that whole week. It's like nonstop. It feels like it's 24/7. And then afterwards, you're trying to even process in your head all of the conversations that you had, all of the things that you learned that you want to follow up on, and then all of the things that piled up while you were out. It's too much. It's just too much. I'm not trying to knock anything about Dreamforce. And I'm an extrovert. I felt that it was just, yeah, it's over the top. So everything that, for those of you who were there in person, it sounds like you were able to have the Dreamforce experience with the similar vibes of the smaller scale from Trailhead DX, and even actually way smaller than Trailhead DX. From what it looked like, from what I've seen online, it looks like there were maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people there.
I think Andy said that there were. Andy, didn't you speak to one of the color people, not the color people, but the color test people about how many people went to Dreamforce?
Yes, I tweeted about it at the time, but I can't remember the test that they sent out to people like us. It was like less than 1,000. The number was, I can't remember the exact number. But obviously with the employees and everybody else, it became maybe 2,000 because I think 2,000 was a number that Brett shared at some point on Twitter again.
San Francisco imposed a maximum of 5,000 people. It was way less than that.
Actually, no one talked about, was there an expo or anything with booths, vendors, anything like that?
There were a demo.
The main platinum sponsors had an outdoor gazebo. If that's what you call it, in covered space. And then Slack had one.
Mercedes was there. Mercedes had a car out there.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
That you couldn't actually look at. That was interesting for me. I was like, can I look at this? They were like, I don't think so. Okay.
It had a car there, but it was covered. What's that?
I don't
It had a
think you-
car there, but it was covered.
It wasn't covered. You couldn't really get close or open the door.
They were afraid of germs. It wasn't vaccinated yet. And the reason why I was thinking of the vendors is because when Rob mentioned the maximum of 5,000, it's like, why would Salesforce then cut it down to only 2,000? And I thought, oh wait, maybe vendors. That's why I immediately jumped to think of.
Well, we spent 20 or 25,000 to be a vendor.
Mhm.
And it was a lock-in that was part of a legacy deal, but
Mhm.
what we got for it was obviously being at the expo. We got name placement, and then they gave us a list of all the attendees. So names, emails, phone numbers. So that's what I guess we're paying for that. But
Right.
the only person that went was Ian. Well, no, Carlos went too. So Ian did a keynote. Carlos was there. mingling. So
Well, we were the audience that showed up in cameras. In fact, somebody called us the props. It was how you can sign up and try and go to David Letterman shows kind of thing.
Mhm.
I think it was like that. Our role was to warm up.
Feet warmers.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't complaining. So yeah, I think that's why the number was very low.
You sat in the Ford at previous Dreamforces, at least one of them I was at. I think it was Dreamforce or World Tour. There's actually a form. If you sit in the front row, they want to make sure that you agreed. Like you couldn't get up because the cameras were going to pan, so they didn't want to have empty seats in the front of the audience. Yeah, they don't like that.
I never sat front row, so I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I saw people sitting in the front row. I sat in the second row. It's no
Too much pressure sitting in the front row. You feel guilty looking at your phone.
You never know when they're going to pan to you.
Exactly. And that's what my wife said. She actually saw the back of my head quite a bit. Does that count?
Yeah, Andy, you're like the biggest Ted Lasso fan that I know. How is Jason Sudeikis?
I was really great. It was awesome. The guy is very good. Obviously, we can tell by the show, but at the same time, he's actually a very nice, candid guy, a great guy to interview. He starts telling stories about how they come up with ideas, how they work with each other. And all the messages are about teamwork and being a good person and all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of fun.
I do remember seeing him jam out during the Foo Fighters. He was wearing some like tie-dye thing. As far as the booths, the ones that I remember, there was like an Einstein booth, like a Microsoft booth, and then some spot that had M&Ms. And I wish I could remember what it was for. All I remember was that I stopped there at least twice for M&Ms. Slack, thank you.
There was
They
IBM.
had great M&Ms though.
Slack had slack colored M&Ms.
But yeah, I will say compared to other Dreamforces where you'd bring a whole carry-on worth of swag back to your place, it was a little lighter this year, which was fine. This is easily my favorite Dreamforce, but honestly, it's the first one that I went to where the last two Dreamforces I went to, I was a customer. And so I would always go with all right, what am I going to do today to add value to my Salesforce or vibe? And this was much more like, for me, how am I going to immerse myself into this community, meet folks that I've been speaking to for the last year, learn a few things that maybe I didn't know, or get inspired to learn a few things that I didn't know. And that was a much better vibe. And I feel like I did Salesforce or Dreamforce right this year.
Yeah, the whole mix of people was quite interesting. I agree with everything that was said. In fact, it was funny with the campfire spaces. At some point, I think Janet and Michelle were presenting in one. And then in the next booth, there was Brett, Sarah, and Parker. I was like, what a competition to present a guest. It was really interesting. You could see pretty much everybody and anybody, and also including some new beginners. And one night I went to the bar on the top floor of Marquise and I hung out with people. A couple of people were there. And it was like a very interesting David Letterman show kind of thing. I would just move from one pod to another. One pod would be new beginners, starters, and the next one would be all architects. So it was a very interesting evening with a lot of stories.
Dreamforce folks know how to party.
Yeah.
Even during a pandemic. Let me just say that. Not telling any stories, but just saying.
I've got pictures.
Yeah, the amount of selfies and typically stickers and parties is usually insane at any Dreamforce. Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else want to talk about? We've got 50 minutes left. We could wrap it up.
John was at Dreamforce. John, are you there? I don't know if he's
John Sim. Oh, wait. And also Rob mentioned before he was there as a vendor. John, you there? I don't know if you took a
Yeah, my experience is you need to slow down because the first time I went, I was like running away from here to here and here, and then I missed a lot of good stuff. And then it seems that there's two entrants, and one entrance was giving up swag that I didn't know. But by the time I found out, it's like, oh, they all give it up, and then sometimes they just put the swag on the floor, so your eyes has to be looking around, and I wasn't doing that, so I missed some of the sweat, but I get enough from the campfire round, and then have a lot of ice cream, water bottle, and then there was some. I also took a picture of the shoes because I was eating my lunch and then he was talking through a camera and he was sitting on the chair. And then I took him and said, "Oh, that was a shining shoe." So when Vanessa talked about shoes, and oh yeah, I took a picture and said, "Oh, that's an interesting shoe." It was a nice experience within the whole thing. And it was, yeah, the first day was very hot. And I just stand under the shade and listening. It was a good experience, and I planned a lot of schedule to go this, and then I stick to some of it, but some of them it was meeting people. So I'm going to meet people and attending the show that I was planning to watch. So it's like meeting people is more important than sometimes shows. But some of the big ones, yeah, I have to be in there to watch it. Yeah, I didn't go to the front row. I was like, I want to be center of attention and just need to get it. And what else? Yeah, it was first time. It was interesting experience, and I meet Vanessa, both Vanessa and a lot of other people, and I meet some consultant and some other prospect where they say, "Oh, where do you work?" I work with nonprofit. Oh, let's connect. So it was a consulting company, and then who knows? A week later, they say, "Hey, we looking for nonprofit manager. Are you interested?" I was like, "Okay, thank you." Connecting in Dreamforce. So there's like eating lunch and then you're talking and then say, "Oh, what do you work?" "Oh, nonprofit." "Oh, I'm a nonprofit consultant." And then we started talking. It was just fun. It's just that you need to slow down. Don't rush just to do it. Slow down, absorb the experience. I learned it so to slow down so that you can enjoy everything. So it was a fun thing. It's somebody commented that there wasn't non-profit live on the show. It's all on streaming plus, but it's fine with me. I watch it when I get home. So it was tiring but excited. And it's my first time going to the concert, the Foo Fighter. I was very close to the barricade, like the second row, and it is really, really loud. So I was wondering, why do they give out earplugs? Now I know the reason. So it was, yeah, it was fun and good experience. And yeah, I just amazed and thank you. That's it. I keep thinking, how was I selected to come? And I just can just thank you, Salesforce, for inviting. I appreciate it very much with other people who went there. So it was a very fun experience, taking pictures, talking to people, enjoying everything. So soaking everything. Campfire where we give out sweat. So my bag is still full of stuff. So it's like it was, yeah, I like it. So I did go to Trailfed DX. I think it was some other company that invited me for the watch party. So that's my first time virtually Salesforce DX. Yeah, it's totally different from other conference before. I used to attend an Oracle conference also at Moscone West. They close up everything, but the atmosphere wasn't like Salesforce. I think Salesforce probably did it better. And then talking about the ranch, I actually heard some other people have the ranch before. It was by data view. He has a ranch. And then when he first started his company, all the employee orientation was at his ranch. And then somebody took over his company. Now they started a new company. So when they say Salesforce Ranch, they probably idea from Workday or from G. So I don't know. It was so when they say ranch, that's interesting. I'm just thankful for the opportunity. And thank you for the opportunity to talk in here. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks for sharing.
So,
Bob, so you were there. Oh, wait, Mike, you were going to say
I'm
something?
going to ask a question in chat.
Yes.
Did anyone not get their Salesforce Plus subscription? There was a big chat the first day. I felt so bad for the moderators.
The Disney Plus or the Disney?
Disney Plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I never got the invite.
I didn't get it.
You got to be a new subscriber. So I finally found the link and then I went, oh, I got to be a new subscriber.
Had I known, I could have created another profile. It was a new subscription to Salesforce Plus. I didn't have one before.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, I felt so bad for the moderators because all of a sudden the chat it just went crazy with how do I get it? How do we get it? How do I get it? Yeah.
Jen, are you talking? If we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So I was going to say, someone said you had to put Disney Plus in the chat, and then everyone started to put Disney Plus, and then you couldn't really see the true questions or comments that people were making.
It's exactly what happened. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's exciting. I'm sure Salesforce was like, this was a great idea. It's giving away 100 iPads. Everyone's going to jump at certain things like that. David, you were going to say something before I jumped in.
I was going to say, Rob, you were also there as a vendor.
No, I actually wasn't. I was in San Francisco, but I didn't go to Dreamforce. Only Ian and Carlos went. There was a whole bunch to do with just logistics and stuff. But I've done, I think, obviously I started working at Salesforce in 2009. So that was my first time as an employee, but I had done 4 before that. So I don't remember what my first one was, but I'm with you. By the time that they did the Love Boat in the harbor, I was like past Dreamforce. I'm like, I hope I never have. Oh, yeah. It just became so big and so wild and wieldy. But I'm very excited that they brought it back down to a manageable thing. And I concur with you. And Michael, one of my favorite events is DX. And I've done, I think, every DX. So that to me was almost perfect, right? I think my hotel bill this is crazy. My hotel bill for the last Dreamforce I did, which 2019, was $40,000 for 2 of us to have a suite for 5 days. So that's crazy. So I think the whole Dreamforce thing just got out of hand and was over the top. But I think that if they keep it this way and maybe do a world tour and keep it manageable and you don't have 250,000 people flooding Moscone like once a year, I think that's a good thing. It's crazy when people start arbitraging hotel rooms a year before. Maybe it's a good thing that we took the needle off the record and reset it. But I think Ian and Carlos's feedback was it felt really intimate. It felt, really cool. They wish it could have been a little bit bigger. I hope we can get back to doing in-person events again. It sounds like the way they pulled it off, everybody felt comfortable. The COVID stuff wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't obstructional. So I hope that we can get back to Dreamforce, but I hope we can do Dreamforce in 10 cities instead of just one. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I was excited, I think, by the multi-city approach for Dreamforce. And I know that evolved because of obviously COVID-19, Delta, and things like that. But it'd be really interesting to see Salesforce try to pull that off with hub cities like New York and Chicago and San Francisco and the city maybe in Texas, like just all over the country and even the world, potentially. You have Paris and one, list goes on and on.
So the only big show that I've done with Elements Cloud was the New York World Tour, because that was in January. And then obviously COVID hit the following March. We expected to do a big ta-da at Dreamforce that year, and obviously it was canceled this year. It was way limited. But I really felt like that was an awesome event. The World Tours, for me as a vendor and for me as a Salesforce consultant, and for me as a Salesforce employee, have always been that and DX. Those have always been the best because, like you said, David, you're not so overwhelmed. You only have two minutes to see somebody. There's somebody on the street way over there and you want to go catch them, but you're too busy talking to this person. You got to find to follow up.
I'm like, why bother? You're not going to remember the conversation 24 hours later.
So yeah, I really think that 2,500, 3,000 attendee event is probably way more manageable for all of us. And it'd be great if it wasn't the Super Bowl or anything.
Great insights. At least we know we're not alone in thinking these things.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see where they go with it. Because I think next year, if the whole COVID thing is behind us and the world's inoculated, I think there's going to be an overreaction. I think that everybody's going to want to go back and you're going to have 400,000 people. It's going to be like 25 minutes for an Uber queue and you won't be able to get a flight. You'll have to stay in Seattle because you can't get a room. I really do think that it's going to come back, like swing back super hard. But then I think my prediction is that it'll mellow out again. Like I said, I think it got crazy when they had the Love Boat in 2011 because they ran out of hotel rooms and they had to bring the cruise liners in and I don't know if you remember, but you actually had to clear customs to get on and off the boat.
Oh my God.
So imagine trying to go to your hotel and having to clear customs every time you went to take a shower. It was madness. So I hope it never gets to that again.
Yeah, I had a friend who stayed on. He said the same thing. And it was like 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get through customs. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, just the logistics of getting from, let's assume, Moscone West to any hotel room, even if it's even if you totally splurged and you're across the street or down the block from Moscone West.
Yeah.
Just dealing with the pedestrian traffic, just to get to the lobby of your hotel and then it's a lot. It's a lot. And trying to deal with that all week, it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. And to the point that Vanessa made before, you're turning around and everyone like, oh my God, I haven't seen you. It's the first time I'm seeing you, or I haven't seen you in forever. The longer you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, the more that happens. And because the more people you end up knowing or know you, and that means you're not going to the bathroom and you're not making that next session.
Yeah. What's funny, David, is that's one of the reasons that we did splurge on the big crazy hotel. So, that big number that I just threw out.
Yeah.
We booked a suite on the top floor of the Four Seasons so that any one of our friends could come there, bathroom, and take a shower. So that was a hospitality suite kind of thing that we threw out there. We had refreshments, we had soft drinks, and that's something that we intend to do again if it ever gets crazy. But because it's, to your point, even if you're just staying down the street at the Intercontinental or something, it's an hour round trip from the floor back to your hotel room, back to the floor. You get grimy and nasty. You don't want to go stand on a line to get a soft drink or something. So it's nice to have, but yeah, it gets expensive.
Yeah. It's actually Dreamforce of 2019. I was on the fence about going for all the reasons that I described earlier. And I had a reservation at an Airbnb that was a good 30 minutes away driving. And that's without even taking into Dreamforce week traffic. And so I wasn't really sure what's going to happen or whether or not the Airbnb host is going to realize that they can add an extra zero to the end of whatever price I was paying and claim that there was a plumbing issue, a leak or something, and just relist the room. So I was like very much on the fence about going, and then Salesforce reached out to me about being a keynote speaker, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, why me? And what are you talking about?" And they said, "And if you are a keynote speaker, by the way, we're going to cover your hotel. We're gonna put you up." I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute, what?"
So there is a silver lining to having a big mouth.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. So they put me up at I didn't even know up until that experience that there was a Virgin Hotel. I did not know that such a thing existed, let alone that it was a block away from Moscone West. The room was it was a regular room. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It cost a bloody fortune. I saw the bill. I wasn't responsible for it, but I saw the bill. It was an insane amount of money that Salesforce paid. I was tremendously appreciative of it. And I tried to leverage whether it was just having the space and quiet and peace of mind, or putting down whatever swag I collected, or going to shower at some point, just changing of clothing. I leveraged it, and it makes a big difference. But it's a crazy experience. But anyway, we're at the top of the hour. Anything else that we should talk about before breaking up for the evening? And Mark, it's almost sunrise here.
And thank you, Mark, for sticking with us the whole meeting as well.
No worries.
All right. Anyone have any questions? Nothing you want to talk about? All right. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us. Excuse me. Michael and I are working on a couple of other future user group meetups, and you'll get to know about it through the Trailblazer community groups. Thanks again. Have a great night.